Episode 88 of the School of Shred. Welcome back, folks. Good morning. Good morning, Shred Nation. Where you guys at? Where you guys at? Let's get up. Let's congregate. As I get my cup of tea prepared here. So, for any of the live audience that's jumping on here, you guys know the drill. Let's throw a flex emoji in the comments. Say what's up. Let me know where you're at, where you're located. We are going to talk today about carb cycling and how it can help you in your dieting efforts. And it might help you lose fat, gain muscle, and become healthier, which is kind of what we want. Okay, so welcome to the show. This is the show that's designed to help you shred your old and make better your new. This is the School of Shred. This is the one and only right here. Brought to you by the Online Health Academy. So today's episode 88, and I thought what we could do is we could do a little bit of training on carbs. A little bit of training on carbs. We're going to open the little black book here. And we're going to get started. So we're going to jump right into it here today. So today, what's on my mind, what's on my heart, what I want to share is carb cycling and cyclical carbs. And we'll talk about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates can be confusing. People can get really confused by them for good reason, because even me as a coach over the years, I have been confused by these because there's a lot of information out there. And the main thing is it takes years to develop a thought process that's worthwhile, I feel. And you have to sift through a lot of debris to find the answers. And so I'm going to share with you some of the answers that I've found over my time helping coaching people. So, and that's what this is going to be about, is carbohydrates. So to start the carb conversation, all right, we got to understand that sometimes carbs are good. Sometimes carbs are not good. They're not good for you sometimes. Sometimes, some carby foods are good for an individual, and sometimes those same carby foods are not good for a different individual. Okay, so this is a reality here, and this is why at School of Shred we talk a lot about glucose numbers and blood chemistry, and actually slowly working in and tailoring a diet to the individual over time. And yes, we do that in a class setting. It's because there's a big gradient. Some people could have a response to a sweet potato, which is usually a good option. Most of us would use the soundbite and the blanket statement. We would assume that it's a good option, which is always dangerous to assume. But we'd assume a sweet potato is good, but some people might metabolize it like a Skittle, and it shoots their blood sugar real high. And this starts to impair their glucose variability. It puts a lot of insulin to work. And if that person's not careful and doesn't take care of their system and create an environment that is conducive with insulin sensitivity, which is the body's ability to store glucose, then they could run the risk of poor health from eating a quote unquote healthy food. So with that said, let's look at two broad statements here. When are carbs good and when are carbs bad? Okay, so carbohydrates can be good if you're metabolically healthy. Okay, that's the big, broad brush to paint with. If you're metabolically healthy, which means a few different things. It means that insulin's working well. Okay, so when you eat, your pancreas secretes insulin because of rises in blood glucose numbers. Because when we eat, our blood sugars go up because insulin is important. Even if we're eating protein, we need insulin to be able to shuttle nutrients and store them away. Okay, in the various sites in the body. This is not talking about just fat gain. Insulin doesn't just equal fat gain, but for metabolically unhealthy individuals, it just might. So if you're metabolically healthy, your body will clear out the blood sugar at a good rate, at a rapid rate. Okay, and then not drop your blood sugar too low. There's also the metabolic health portion of how much glycogen storage do you have. So glycogen is a mixture. It's a matrix of carbohydrates and water. It's basically your stored energy source. And so that can be stored in the liver. The liver is a nice immediate energy storehouse. And then we also have the muscles. The more muscle you have, the more glycogen you can handle. And then after that, we start getting into the adipose sites, which is the fat tissue. So if you're metabolically healthy and you're exercising and your body can handle the insulin load, and you have the glycogen capacity, the storage capacity, then your body will take the sugars and the proteins and all that, and it'll store them in the muscle, stores them as glycogen in the muscle and the liver. Like I said, the more muscle you have, the more glycogen you can store. Therefore, theoretically, the more metabolically healthy you could be, or you should be. So that's when carbs are good. Carbs are very good for people who are metabolically healthy. Two specific times that carbs can be very good for a metabolically healthy individual would be post-workout. Glycogen resynthesis is faster with a mixture of fructose and a starchy type carbohydrate. So fructose can actually switch to liver from a catabolic mode, and then the starches can be turned into glycogen for the muscles. So that can be a good mixture after a workout, after a hard workout, a resistance workout. Carbohydrates could be very good. Are they essential? Do you have to have them after workout? No, but that's one of the best times. The other time to consider would be before bed at night, the last meal of the day, a couple hours before bed, not right before bed, but a couple hours before bed, spiking insulin to try and get your body into a parasympathetic rest and digestive state. One cool thing about carbohydrates is they create they up neurotransmitter production in the gut, and neurotransmitters are the building blocks for melatonin, which helps you get deep, restful sleep. So, which is interesting because when I got into fitness, it was all about have carbs in the morning, so you burn them off was the thought process. You burn them off before you go to bed. But now we're really looking more at a hormonal thing, because it's not about trying to burn them off like they're going to get stored as fat, because calories do matter. It's about strategically using them. So after a workout and before bed are two good times for the metabolically healthy individual to use carbs. And then if the metabolically healthy individual wants to do them at every meal, that's fine as well, because they're metabolically healthy. They can handle it. Their body knows what to do with that glucose. And it can shuttle it where it needs to go into these healthy spots. So second thing, when are carbs good? So when are carbs good? They're good for the metabolically healthy. What's the second point? They're good for people. They can be good for people. All right. There's no definites here, but they can be good for people who engage in lots of anaerobic activity. That's without the presence of oxygen, because that's when we use glycogen very rapidly, when we're anaerobic. So there's two forms of exercise. There's aerobic, which is when your body creates energy in the presence of oxygen. Okay. It can be called oxidative phosphorylation. This is when we burn fat in the beta oxidation cycle. And then we also have the anaerobic side of the house, which is going to be when your body creates energy when there's a lack of oxygen. This is when lactate is built, lactic acid, that burn. That's a lack of oxygen. Okay. And so what happens is your body starts to create energy out of what's called ATP. So you have two different forms there. The anaerobic process is called the glycolytic process. So it relies on glycogen. It relies on the storage form of carbohydrates to create energy quickly. Carbohydrates, if you're metabolically healthy, can become energy very, very quickly. That's a good thing. There's certainly no reason you couldn't participate if you're doing high fat, low carb and anaerobic activity. Personally, myself, I'm a low carb guy, but I think you're getting the idea here. I'm here to coach and serve, and I'm here to kind of give you all the information. So I just choose not to do a lot of carbohydrates in my diet. I don't really react to them as well as I would like to. But just know that, if you do a low carb, high fat diet long term, you can actually increase glycogen stores. They've actually showed this now with the ketogenic diet. Eventually, your body starts to replenish glycogen stores. So, but it's just easier on your system if you do it from carbohydrates. If you're doing a lot of anaerobic activity and you're metabolically healthy, you've passed that test and you want to have carbs, and you're also doing anaerobic events. So things like martial arts, basketball, lots of very intense metabolic training, so high reps, supersets, lots of sweating, lots of running, whatever. If you're doing tire flips and battle ropes, all that kind of crazy stuff, that for you might be a good thing to have some carbohydrates in. That might be a good time for carbs. And then the last thing here, when are carbs good, is when you want to grow muscle, assuming that you're metabolically healthy. Okay. You ain't going to grow muscle if you're not metabolically healthy efficiently anyway. But being metabolically healthy means not piling crap food into your system. Most of the time, that's not going to help you. That's going to do the opposite. But if you are trying to gain muscle and that's your primary goal, and you're okay gaining a little bit of fat because they go together. If you want to gain significant amounts of muscle and you're metabolically healthy, you want to utilize insulin spikes. You actually want to utilize insulin. And so if your body is in good metabolic health and you go onto a bulking plan where you want to gain muscle and get stronger, you want to get bigger, doing several meals a day, which is the opposite of more of the fat burn process, doing several meals a day where you're spiking insulin all the time and insulin storing, that's what you want if you're giving your body the demand. But you have to be metabolically healthy, so you're insulin sensitive. How do you become insulin sensitive? You become insulin sensitive by exercising, by sleeping enough, 7 to 9 hours a night, by exercising, depending on what your goal is. If it's hypertrophy, doing resistance training, challenging the muscles, progressive overload, things like that. Make sure that your execution is on point. That's the first thing you should focus on. But if you're doing those things, that can make you more insulin sensitive. And then you can also try things like fasting as well, because fasting can create some insulin sensitivity, even if you are bulking. It can be good to clean things up. So when are carbs not good? So we just went over when they could be good. When could they not be good? Unfortunately, a lot of the obese population of the United States falls under this category. And this might ruffle some feathers a little bit, because people want to ride the fence a lot, and they want to be vanilla and say that balance is good and this and that. Well, if you're not metabolically healthy, I don't think balance is good. I think that's where you got to start tweaking and looking at things that might yield some more deliberate results. And so what do I mean by that? Well, carbs might not be good for people who aren't engaging in lots of anaerobic activity. Okay, so if you are engaging in a lot of aerobic activity, like say you're the typical American, and some days the best you can do is go out for a couple walks, and you're doing an aerobic based thing. Good, you get your non-exercise calories up. You're not really utilizing carbohydrates. Your body will utilize them, but you're doing more of an aerobic based lifestyle, and that goes hand in hand with beta oxidation and fat burn. So if you do lower carbohydrates and higher fat, low carb, high fat, that might be a good time to not have carbs. Is if you're just walking, say you're exercising once a day, but you're not trying to kill yourself. You're just trying to move your body, move your muscles, get stronger. You want to get leaner. It's a great time to go low carb. For some, it's a great time to consider it. And then if you're metabolically compromised, okay, so, when are carbs good? When you're metabolically healthy, you can try them out. When are carbs not so good? When you're metabolically compromised, you need to be looking at these things. Now, there's different scenarios that I might give somebody carbohydrates. If I have somebody who's got some adrenal issues going on or some thyroid stuff, carbohydrates will probably be in their plan. They'll probably have a nice balanced plan to try and get their body into a good swing, a good groove. If somebody's got really erratic blood sugar, fasting glucose numbers, and they have some insulin resistance going on, then that's the time that absolutely no, I'm not going to have somebody do carbs there. I don't think it's a good idea, because you're literally feeding a food that's going to spike insulin even more so. If you are insulin resistant, it might behoove you even to do higher fat and keep protein, not do straight protein feedings either. So like consider things like protein shakes. If you don't have any fat in there, it's going to spike insulin because protein is insulinogenic. Fat is the least insulinogenic food there is. That's why the ketogenic diet, people lose tremendous amounts of fat on it. It's really because insulin is staying low. That's one of the main reasons. It increases insulin sensitivity. You have to do it forever? No, you don't have to do it forever. But when you're compromised, you have to do different things than people that have metabolically sound systems do. You have to do things differently. And this is where I think a lot of the industry that I'm in gets hung up on things, which is it's binary thinking. It's one or the other. It's keto or it's high carb. It's if it fits your macros, or it's all hormones. It's like there is a gradient here, and it has to be custom fit per individual. Now you can label a few different archetypes of people that you might see over time. You might see the same client a few different times, right? Where different name, different face, but they have similar issues, and you kind of know how to navigate that from your experience before. But there's not a one size fits all thing. There's not a one size fits all deal. So if you're metabolically compromised, it might behoove you to do low carb for a while to try and get your body resensitized to the effects of insulin. Okay. So if you ask less of insulin, your pancreas doesn't have to secrete it. So it can actually rest on it. Over time, through exercise and diet modification, then if you start to feed in carbohydrates at strategic times, say like after a workout, something I learned in one of my first nutrition certifications was called metabolic force feeding, which was when you, it's basically when you start feeding carbohydrates in during a workout or right after a workout to try and increase insulin or glycogen resynthesis and insulin sensitivity. But anyway, if you're metabolically compromised, that is a time that you might want to consider going low carb. Furthermore, testing blood glucose numbers can tell you a lot about how you're metabolizing carbohydrates. Some people will metabolize them really well. Some people won't. Like I've said, self-proclaimed, I don't metabolize them super well. I can get away with them here and there, but I choose not to. I feel better not doing a lot of them, but I still do them. I have carbohydrates here and there. I love fruit, stuff like that. Sweet potatoes and rice and all that. You know, if I go out, sometimes I'll have bread and things like that, but I just do a lot less of that now. So anyway, so that's when it's good. When is it bad? Okay. So now let's get into kind of the gist of the show here. So cyclical carbohydrates. So how to carb cycle. So now that we've talked a lot about the ins and outs of carbohydrates, we just got a big 17-minute training on that. Now let's talk about a few different ways that you can implement a carb cycling deal if you want to. And what carb cycling does is it helps insulin sensitivity, or it can help insulin sensitivity. And that's when you restrict carbs for a portion of time and then you feed them back in. And so what you're doing is you're kind of pulling the brake down and then you're putting the gas pedal on and you're retraining your body to know what to do with the effects of insulin and carbohydrates when you do eat them. And it can have some favorable effects. You can spike leptin. If you're not leptin resistant, if your brain's not leptin resistant, it can actually help increase the fat burn effect. So this can be a really cool thing if you're metabolically healthy. So the first option A, would be to do 3 low carb days and 1 high day. So what you could do is not have any active carbs for 3 days in your diet. So if you're not counting calories, if you're counting calories, we could say, you know, if you're doing 100 grams of carbs a day, you do 50 grams of carbs a day for 3 days, and then you feed those extra carbs back in. The 150, you would just add that on the 4th day and have like 250. All right. So you do 50 grams of carbs for 3 days in a row. And then you get the same sum of the 4 days, but you just get the real high carb day at 250 grams of carbs on the 4th day. And then you go back to 50 grams of carbs 3 days in a row. If you're not counting macros though, what you can do is just pull carbohydrates from your diet and not have any starchy active carbs for 3 days. So nothing more than maybe a piece of fruit, but not even that, meat, vegetables, fats, all that good stuff for 3 days. And then on the 4th day, you could load up on carbs for every meal. You know, you have a good portion of carbohydrates with every meal for the day. And then the next day you get right back on it. There's a couple things that you want to consider when you're looking at doing these types of things. One, expect your body to be hungry the next day. Expect your body to be craving carbohydrates because of the hormones, the hunger hormones that you're going to release if you do this. Specifically, if you do low fat, high carb for a couple of days, expect to be a lot hungrier. You're going to have to maintain those hunger sharks in your stomach. Okay. And then we're going to get into option B now. Option B, Monday through Friday, you could do low carb, high fat. It's like what I just talked about. So instead of 3 days, you do 5 days. And then on weekends, you just do relaxed eating where you do higher carbohydrates. This works well for the kind of the weekend warrior who during the work week, they can stay tight on their diet, but then on the weekends, it's like they want to go out with their friends. They want to be able to indulge in some food and whatnot. Go ahead and do that. You'll figure out over time if it's working for you or not. But that's another way to do a carb cycle. There was one thing, I believe it was called the anabolic diet. I think it was the anabolic diet from Marco Di Pasquale. And it was basically the idea of eating ketogenic diet Monday through Friday, and then you just go off and just carb load for 1 to 2 days. It could be one meal or it could be 2 days worth, but you got to figure out what's best for you, where you have your basically your cheat meal through carbohydrates, and then you go back into it. So you suppress your metabolism all week, and then you feed it and gorge it. I'm not a super big fan of that kind of stuff anymore. I used to like it a lot and find novelty in it, but now I'm more about health and wellness. So, but it is kind of like the weekend warrior type thing, and it can work. I just don't know if it'll work long term and be good for you. So, so those are two main ways to do it. So you have 3 low days of carbohydrates, 1 high carbohydrate day, where you add in carbs for every meal, and you find your happy place there. Option B is the Monday through Friday you do low carb, and then on the weekends you go higher carb. With that said, we got plateau troubleshooting. Okay, so what happens if you hit a plateau? So say you want to lose body fat, you want to get leaner, and you hit a plateau and things aren't moving. And it's like, what do I do? Should I just pull more food? Should I pull calories? Should I exercise more? Should I go with this exercise more, eat less thing? What should I do? Something that you can try to do is actually double your carbohydrate intake. Okay. Or, roughly, like I said, if you're not measuring carbohydrates, that's fine. Just know what it looks like on a plate. If it's the size of the palm of your hand, you do 2 palm sizes. And you do that for 1 to 2 days, and then you get back onto your strict plan. Just by doing that and increasing carbohydrates, you can decrease the stress on your body by over-consuming. Sometimes it does decrease the stress on your body. If you binge eat and over-consume too much, it could send a stress response and cause inflammation. But sometimes the body just needs to be fed and rested. And so if you do, within reason, a couple real high carb days where you double your carbohydrates, that can help kickstart things and get you back on the path, eat without having to drop calories. That's one of the main ways that I like to do things. Another way that I like to do things is actually increase food intake, but just keep carbohydrates low. So I'm keeping insulin low, but I'm feeding my body more and I'm feeding my cells more fat. There's some interesting research to show that when you bring calories down and expenditure up, what happens is your body will expend less. So less food comes in, less energy goes out. More food goes in, more energy comes out through heat energy, through exercise that you don't realize you're doing. So I find that to be very interesting. That's something that I try to pulse on now quite a bit, but I try to control insulin while I'm doing that and keep myself metabolically healthy. So that's episode 88, Cyclical Carbohydrates. I hope you guys learned something today. Go ahead and throw me some fire in the comments if you're still with me. We got some people watching here live. You can find the show Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and then you can take the School on the Go on the podcast app on iTunes, as well as Spotify. Ask any questions that you have today, for we have a Q&A Friday tomorrow. We're going to open up some questions, open up a can of questions, open up a case of questions tomorrow, so you guys can go into the weekend with some new knowledge and have a great weekend. So I'll see everybody tomorrow at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time here. That's it for the School of Shred, the one and only, the almighty. And with that, I want you to stay strong and healthy in body, stay relentless and energized in your spirit today, and stay determined in your pursuits always. That spells shred. Now go shred the day and get better in every way. We'll see you guys tomorrow at 9 a.m.